as we grow, it's a fun challenge. Let me see how I get that off the side. Oh, there we go. No, I'm trying to get this off the side there. Let's see. Not sure how to do that. 1 second. It just popped up there. No. Sean, you don't know how to do that, do you?
Are you referring to the video side bar thing?
I can see it's kind of blocking my slides. I don't know if it's blocking it for you all. Also.
Here, let's see if, did that do it?
Yeah.
If video is turned on, that will pop up.
Okay, yeah, that's why I turned it off. Okay, great. All right, back to what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm also working on recruiting some fishermen for the company and engaging those fishermen in the company's management and development. And a big part of my role that will be, I'm starting to kind of sink my teeth in more after I get up to speed with the supply chain management piece, is working on sustainability, trust, and social and environmental impact for the company. So Sitka Salmon Shares, as I'm sure you all know, is really dedicated to the social and environmental impact of our work, of the fisheries, of the fishermen's livelihoods that we work with. And we want to continue to improve and do a better job and really be able to assess that and define what that impact is. I'm also monitoring the status of fisheries that we participate in and marine ecosystem impacts up here in Alaska, which are very interesting and very dynamic right now with climate change and the warming trends we're seeing. I'm also managing our 1% for the Wild Fund, which is where we put 1% of our gross profits every year and put that back into fisheries habitat and conservation work. And developing partnerships and engaging in the values-based seafood movement, which I've done for a while, and that's a great part of my job. So that's in a nutshell my role. So now diving into the content a little bit more, and I'm guessing you all as informed Salmon Shares members know some of this already. So to understand kind of the nature of community-supported fisheries, we really have to understand the nature of seafood itself. And of course, it is a global commodity with a lot of issues. It is the world's last major source of wild protein. It's very unique in that way. And it's the world's most traded food commodity, more than any other food, which is a little, hard to fathom. Worth nearly $153 billion in 2017. And again, fraud, mislabeling, illegal sourcing, lack of supply chain transparency, environmental degradation, and human rights violations, including slavery, as many of you know, are major challenges plaguing the global seafood supply chain. Seafood has the highest rates of reported fraud for any food, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all cases. So it's really hard to know what you're eating when you buy fish a lot of times. And of course, the US, this is what's really coming into the supply chain in the US, because we import 80 to 90% of the seafood that's consumed. And you'll see there's some fact checking on this number in recent years. Some of the seafood we export from the US comes back to us reprocessed, so it's a little fuzzy, but generally it's believed to be around 80 to 90%, but I would expect that to be kind of revised as we understand things a little bit more. That means that wild seafood typically is traveling on average 5,800 miles from boat to plate. And as with commodity agriculture, commodity seafood really tends to extract wealth from communities rather than build wealth locally or regionally. Fishermen and workers are marginalized, and consumers, communities, and food systems and the environment are really losing out in this system. So how are we shifting it? Well, you all are shifting it, and we're shifting it together by relocalizing our seafood supply chain. The US really does have an abundant, diverse, and relatively well-managed supply of seafood. It's not perfect. Alaska is far and above most of the rest of the country. But in the US compared to globally, we are doing a really good job. And we export a lot of seafood. So we have plenty of seafood, we're sending it out. Why aren't we eating it here? And fishing really still is critical to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of a lot of our fishing communities in the US. And so I wanted to add that this movement for sustainable fisheries, community-based fisheries, and small-scale fisheries really kind of has started in the policy and management arena. And that's been going on for a while. So community-based fishermen, small-scale fishermen have been fighting for their rights and getting their interest advanced in the policy arena. And now it's starting to translate into the food movement and into markets. So I wanted to tell you all a little bit more about my story, why CSFs, and this is a story of Kodiak tanner crab and catch 49, as it's called now, the CSF I helped to start here in Alaska. So this Kodiak tanner crab, and you all, if you've ordered, it's known as bear eye tanner crab or giant snow crab. They catch it in Southeast Alaska also. Kodiak has a small tanner crab fishery that is really important to the livelihoods of small boat fishermen. It happens in the winter there, a very short season. It occurs when not many other fisheries are taking place, so it provides a nice boost to their income in the winter. This product historically was shipped almost entirely to Japan and not available at all to customers in Alaska or really even domestically. So at the organization I used to work for, we worked really closely with these tanner crab fishermen to protect tanner crab from bottom trawling around Kodiak Island for many years, all sorts of efforts around the sustainability of tanner crab. Meanwhile, nobody could get their hands on this thing, so we're kind of working to tell the story of tanner crab and why we need these protections, and realize we needed people in Alaska to connect with this product. So we started trying to figure out how to get boxes of tanner crab from Kodiak over here in Anchorage, and we succeeded in doing it, and it was very popular, and we were able to get the fishermen about 40% more than they were getting for a tanner crab, and we just kept going after that, and that led to the creation of Catch 49. And yeah, it's kind of a good highlight, and I think really defines the story behind CSFs and why we need them. You know, we have these great products, we have these stories, we have small boat fishermen, and we have people who want local consumers, regional consumers, domestic consumers who want these products. So we have to figure out solutions and innovations in the supply chain to make it happen. So that CSF was started around 2010, but even before that, the story goes, and of course there's no real truth to this. Everybody was kind of getting these ideas around the same time, I think, including on the West Coast, but what the community kind of accepts as some of the earliest CSFs were around 2007 in Maine, where Port Clyde Fresh Catch started, and also in North Carolina. So yeah, 2007, so not very long ago, 12 years, fishermen and coastal community residents were starting to catch on to this idea and seeing what was happening with CSAs, of course, and the success of farmers in creating new markets through CSAs, and started poking around with this idea of CSFs. And here we are. And of course, the idea, has been to connect local fishermen with consumers, offering them high quality, locally caught, traceable seafood that they can trust, not global commodity seafood. And one of the key tenets for CSFs, and still really a core tenet for most CSFs, is improving incomes for local fishermen, getting fishermen a better price, helping shift market power towards them. In many communities, especially in rural Alaska and in the lower 48, fishermen may only have one choice or maybe two in terms of processors to deliver their catch to, and that really limits their ability and the I think Sean was playing something there. That limits, their market power and their ability to find new outlets, to connect to consumers, and to get a better price. So that is a core tenet of CSFs, and of course, shortened supply chains that enforce the connection between fishermen and consumers. So you all being on the presentation, the last Lunch and Learn with Ryan is a really good example of that. Some of our members coming up to Sitka, that's exactly what we want to be seeing from CSFs, providing information on the who and how of their fish. That's really critical to what CSFs do, and of course educating consumers about the fisheries, where their fish is coming from, how it's caught, and some of the associated environmental and social issues with these fisheries. So Sitka Salmon Shares was started and kind of became an idea in 2011, and then a separate business in 2012. So that was still, kind of early on in the CSF growth and coming onto the scene. That was the same year as the first local seafood summit in New Hampshire. And I just wanted to point out that they're, regional and local brands. So different communities, like where I'm from on the East Coast, there's like Ocracoke Catch. There's all these local brands, Copper River Seafoods. Of course, that's a regional brand that was developed. Fish markets, and then even technology apps. There's one called Fishline, where consumers, when they're in California, can pull up Fishline and find fish on the dock. These are, pretty similar efforts that are helping to achieve similar results as CSFs. So it's kind of all part of this ecosystem and solutions and innovations around local and community-based seafood. But today I'm mostly just going to touch on CSFs. In terms of the scale and diversity of CSFs right now, in the US, there's about 100, and some of these are more fishermen just selling direct, but that's kind of generally how people feel right now. There's about 100, and that's compared to over 2,500 CSAs. So we have a long way to go to catch up to the number of CSAs. And there's a huge amount of diversity in the business models, structures, and sizes of the CSFs. Some, like the one I used to run, is based within a nonprofit. There are quite a few that are run that way. No other CSFs, as far as I know, have the processing infrastructure like Sitka Salmon Shares does. And that is a huge barrier. I'll talk a little bit more about that to a lot of CSFs, just that investment in infrastructure that you have to make to be able to grow to any size and serve any, a larger market. Some CSFs, like this one pictured here, Fishadelphia, which is in Philadelphia, is run by a group of students as an after-school club. It's pretty neat. It's more of a workforce development program. And so that CSF, for example, isn't as focused on sustainability of their product, but they are building some interesting urban and rural connections between local fishermen and helping kids understand what's going on in the ecosystem. So kind of very different goals. With Fishadelphia, they're not necessarily trying to raise the income of fish, but they are doing a lot of good for local students in Philadelphia. So that's pretty neat to see how some of the models are evolving. And again, they're really tailored to the regions that they serve. And then there are variations, on the social and environmental issues addressed by CSFs. And of course, there's a lot of debate on what a CSF is, and some of you probably know this, but the CSA term in the agricultural world has also been hotly debated. And in California in particular, they have legislated what it means to be a CSA. So we're not sure if that's to come for CSF. I'll talk more about it, but we're not going down that road right now. But this article did come out a few years ago in the New Food Economy, and that was the headline. Everybody wants to be a CSF. Nobody can agree on what it is. And and that's has to do with, in general, this the claims of seafood and a lot of food about how ethical they are, and seafood is really at the top of the food ethics claims. I think it says it's 61% over the ethical claims of other food. And of course, this leads to conflicting and confusing messaging. But companies know, the market knows that consumers really want to be told, that the seafood is sustainable and good and local and supports community fishermen. So companies are starting to do that. And that actually led to this particular notorious case of Fulton Fish Market.com, which has ties to the very historic Fulton, the actual physical fish market in New York City that's been around, I think it says, since 1822. So they started kind of an online e-commerce spinoff, calling this Fulton Fish Market a CSF, while sourcing fish from everywhere around the world that was coming through Fulton Fish Market. So a lot of us that were part of the CSF community thought this was a really egregious case of calling yourself a CSF. So 76 businesses and organizations signed on to this letter, but it really kind of got the conversation going about what is a CSF, what do we mean by that, and what do we do when somebody who the community clearly feels like is not a CSF is using that term. So we jumped into action, sent this letter, and I think this is a good quote down here from Brett Tolley, who's really active in the movement. And you can read that, but it's basically greenwashing, co-optation of the values, and kind of watering down those of us, the work of those of us who are really trying to uphold what it means to be a CSF. And so what happened around this time was that through localcatch.org, again, this is the kind of umbrella organization, the network of community-supported fisheries and values-based seafood businesses in the U.S. This was the second gathering, really, of CSFs in 2016 in Virginia. And so a lot of us came together, and we developed these core values that you see there on the right that we feel define a CSF. So we said if you're saying you're a CSF, you really need to commit to these core values and be able to demonstrate how you're meeting them. Slow Fish USA is really the other organization in the US that is helping to ground the values-based seafood movement. So if you're all familiar with Slow Food, similar idea. It's about good, clean, and fair fish. What we came out of that meeting with, I think if you can mute, there's some background noise. What we came out of the 2016 summit with is Josh Stoll, who's the founder of Local Catch, said that we've taken the perspective that what a CSF is, what it is, has less to do with the operational mechanics and more to do with these core principles. So moving forward, again, it's not about whether you're getting frozen fish, you're getting fresh fish, if it's from one fisherman or a group of fishermen, if it's from your own processor or partner processors. It's really about these core values, and are these kind of driving what the CSF is doing. So some recent progress in community and local seafood. So again, we've been really defining and helping to reinforce our values. Actually, just as of last week, some folks had a meeting with the Fulton Fish Market CEO, and they agreed to stop using the term CSF. So this was a couple years in the making, and it just now happened, and that kind of shows the resilience and the fortitude that it takes to make progress in this arena. So that was great. We've also been making some progress with the James Beard Foundation, who has been a little bit more supportive of things like industrial aquaculture than some of us would have liked. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing as a community. A number of people that we work with in Louisiana, in June, they fought hard for a state bill requiring labeling of shrimp imports. So I'm sure some of you have been to Louisiana. When you go to Louisiana, you expect Louisiana shrimp. And before this bill was passed, you wouldn't know if it was Louisiana shrimp or farm shrimp from Thailand. So they're taking some great steps there to make sure that shrimp is labeled, and that will go a long ways in supporting local fishermen. Some of you are probably aware of some major threats to fisheries here in Alaska, like the proposed gold and copper mine in Bristol Bay, known as Pebble Mine. While it's still a big threat that we're battling, it's really bringing fishermen together across the country and across Alaska and uniting around this and defending fisheries and making it known how important the future health of fisheries like those in Bristol Bay are. A kind of neat spinoff of CSFs has been restaurant-supported fisheries. So company Dock to Dish in particular has really leaned into this model of restaurant-supported fisheries and providing chefs kind of whatever is caught by their fishermen. And a number of organizations and businesses are really starting to work with institutional buyers, so universities, schools, and hospitals to help shift their purchasing policies and get more values-based seafood into institutions. And we are seeing CSFs continue to grow nationally and internationally. So a lot of things to be positive about here. So the future of community seafood. So can CSFs disrupt the seafood supply chain? Lots of question marks after that. So we do know that keeping seafood domestically, does benefit fishermen, our food systems, and economies, and that there is plenty of demand in the marketplace for this kind of values-based, community-based seafood, thanks to members like you. And there's a little diagram from outfit called Fish 2.0 about the market potential of CSFs. They're basically saying at the bottom rung there's 16 million people. There's a market of 16 million people for CSFs, and even hitting that 16 million people would be 400 times where we are now. So a long ways to go to even achieve the minimum potential. But there are a lot of huge challenges that we live every day at Sitka Salmon Shares, and really the supply chain infrastructure. Getting fish from the boats, processed, trucked and shipped and cut and packed, really is very, very challenging. Managing a perishable product like seafood and getting it hopefully arriving on your doorstep in perfect, beautiful condition. It's tough work, and that's why not many businesses have been able to get to this size. So we're trying our hardest, and we hope other companies are able to do the same. But we can expect kind of more co-optation, as we call it, fraud and false claims to come in the future as companies try and compete for market position. Like I said, they know this market demand is out there, so you likely see ads in your social media and other places for almost a new company, I would guess every couple weeks or every month or so, from somebody new that's cropping up trying to do this. And of course it's very hard to tell what is what. So we are trying to move more towards this community accountability model within the CSF world. So when we see something that's wrong, we feel like the term's not being used correctly, we're trying to develop a process where we can address that internally with each other, and again, really keep integrity in the name and the model. And that will require, including at Salmon Shares, what we're trying to do is clearly demonstrating and articulating our social environmental impact and how we are living up to those values. And CSFs are doing a really good job actively supporting each other across the country. We eagerly answer questions for other CSFs, provide them all sorts of tips and insight, and likewise get them from others too. And here's a couple pictures at recent gatherings and local catch. There's been the Community Fisheries Network in recent years, and Slowfish, like I mentioned, and we try and gather every year or two to support each other and talk about the movement, and we're in touch quite a bit. So a lot of us know that collaboration is really critical to our future. And with regards to that collaboration and engagement, here are a few opportunities that are open to everyone, and not just those of us who are on the management side of CSFs, right? If you all are in the Midwest, Farm Aid is coming up. Don't know if you have this on your radar. September 21st at Alpine Valley, which is in East Troy, Wisconsin. And some of the groups that are part of the CSF movement have been working to elevate the voice of small scale and family fishermen as a part of Farm Aid for many years now. So I will be there. Ryan Horwath, who did our last Lunch and Learn, one of our fishermen, will be present at Farm Aid, and will be helping to elevate, family fishermen at Farm Aid in Wisconsin this year, which is great since it's right in the backyard of Salmon Shares. In the bottom right here, you'll see a little image for these Slowfish 201 local seafood webinars. These are continuing, and these are open to the public. It's conversations with panelists about, it's about seafood fraud in many ways, and they've been really great. I think we've had 3 or 4 so far, and the next one is on October 4th. So if you go to localcatch.org, you can find out more about those webinars and join there. In October in Portland, Oregon, we are having the 3rd local seafood summit that is also open to anyone that wants to attend. And then also on the radar is Slowfish 2020 in New Hampshire. So lots of opportunities to connect. It'd be great to see some Salmon Shares members there. So drop us a line if you might show up. And I think, thank you. Ready for questions now. Hopefully, I'm sure I missed a lot of things. And I think we can unmute now, Sean, if you want. And I'll give you all my email if you ever have any questions or want to get more engaged in any of those networks. My email is just Kelly, Kelly, @sitkasalmonshares.com. Thanks.
Am I unmuted? This is Roxanne.
Hi, Roxanne. We gotcha loud and clear.
Hi. Thanks, Kelly. That was just great.
Thanks, Roxanne.
So in my former life, I was a local foods expert. So I was more into agriculture. And one of the concerns that was growing over time was that as the sustainable small farming movement grew, it cut into the profits of the big guys who had their eye on those dollars being lost because people were choosing to buy, CSAs and go to farmers markets, etc. And one of the concerns that I have, and it makes it hard because then say the Whole Foods or whatever comes in and says, well, we're going to carry your stuff. we'll carry your stuff, and then of course that fisherman, that that, or that farmer can make so much less, and it just isn't not very much fair wages, but they can buy so much that they will, there's a danger there. And can you address that, where it just becomes sort of like, well, gee, if I can get local fish, like straight from a fisherman through my local grocery store or my whatever, why would I even do a CSF?
Yeah. In terms of grocery outlets, I'm not extremely familiar with how retail works, honestly. I think I think in agriculture, so food hubs have grown up as a mechanism to help individual farmers meet the demand of larger wholesale markets like grocery stores. I think for fishermen, it's tough unless it's on a very small scale, like a small local grocery store, to be able to serve those markets. And in my experience, wholesale markets are, very particular. They need a lot of certainty about the, specifications of the product, the price, the when, and it's not really suited to how smaller scale seafood works. So I think it's, very difficult to do. I see progress in retail, like with Bristol Bay salmon, for example. The fishermen in Bristol Bay have been successful at creating a brand for Bristol Bay salmon, and now more supermarkets are starting to carry Bristol Bay salmon. There's some success there, but I think it's extremely difficult unless it's on a small scale to be able to put a level of detail on the who and how of your catch at that supermarket level. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, it did to some degree, and I just think it's something to watch, and to when one organization put together a infographic that showed how much more a farmer made by selling at a farmer's market versus through his stuff through the grocery store. It was a huge impact, and it was a very informative to the outside world. Like, what? A farmer can't make any money by having that profit siphoned off the top. So I know that Sitka Salmon Shares has put out something about that, and that's something that I think a lot of us Sharesians really care about, is that the fishermen are getting a fair wage, because they're doing so much more work for us than, to make the catch as good as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is tough to achieve.
Yeah, so those infographics, if you come out with any more of those are really great. I know I use it when I sell shares at markets a lot.
Great. Yeah, that's Sean's good work.
Yay, Sean, thanks. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thoughts? Ideas?
It looks like we have a question from Gina. She's asking if you, Kelly, know anything about the James Beard Foundation in relation to CSFs. And the basis of her question is her restaurant experience in Chicago that are James Beard Foundation darlings, as she says. And she's wondering what the authenticity and ethics are of that relationship.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about that, Gina. So James Beard Foundation, from my understanding, I've been on the outskirts a little bit of working with them, but they started to get more into the seafood realm about 2 or 3 years ago, and they adopted this program called Smart Catch, which was started by another organization and was intended to help restaurants source
You
seafood.
okay for Scotty to do your water sampling? He knows how to do it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so then we're gonna go do it.
Sorry, somebody can mute. We're getting your
Want to stop and do sampling?
conversation there.
I don't even know when we're gonna leave yet, so.
Okay.
Can shuffle cards around.
Sorry, can you mute that, Sean, maybe? Okay. So that Smart Catch program that James Beard Foundation adopted, there were a lot of us in the community that didn't feel like the values were there with that program. So they've actually gotten rid of it. And they are, I think, now in a period of transition and thinking about their seafood work. So some, folks that I work with in the community have an active dialogue ongoing about what that looks like. There has been, I think, some support from James Beard Foundation for, industrial scale aquaculture that we weren't very happy with. So I would say they're learning. We want to help them learn and get to a better place on seafood that ultimately does encompass those values of the CSF and community-based seafood community.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
My name is Lisa. I'm calling from the Chicago area, and I wonder, I'd like more information on aquaculture. And are there any aquaculture models that fit in with the values that the CSFs have?
Yes, yes, absolutely, and they tend to be the shellfish aquaculture models. So oysters, mussels, clams, kelp, small scale regenerative types of aquaculture. Being from Alaska, we have banned offshore aquaculture here, so we have very kind of strong opinions about aquaculture, having seen some very dramatic declines in salmon prices due to the global supply of farm salmon. I think Wisconsin has the biggest land-based salmon farm right now. And there's a new one, I think it's online now in Miami. I think it just depends on what you're interested in as a consumer. In terms of the food safety, the food quality, there are all sorts of issues. Land-based aquaculture is definitely better than offshore aquaculture in terms of the impacts. And if you all followed the great escapes of Atlantic salmon from Washington State last year, was it, I believe, the impacts of farm salmon on the West Coast are a huge concern. Land-based, is a different story, but salmon are still carnivorous fish. There are a lot of innovations and things in the works around feed types for farmed fish. But I would say in terms of kind of the CSF values, there are some, but they are the shellfish farms. If that answers your question, hopefully. It's a complex one.
It does, yes, thanks. I was particularly interested in land-based aquaculture because I've been reading more about that in the Midwest and wondering if that's something that is valuable or not valuable in terms of, in addition to, other types of CSF.
Yeah, I think it's something. To watch and monitor. I try not to try to be open-minded and not take too hard lines on things. It's a great form of protein. So maybe we'll see. None of those companies are kind of involved in the CSF conversations. There is actually on the West Coast. There's a trout farm that is run by 2 by Sea, by a really innovative company They're doing all kind of vegetarian feeds for this trout farm. It's called McFarland Springs. That is one example that I know of a company that is doing fish farming, not shellfish farming. That is kind of part of the movement. So yeah, I think maybe it can be done, but I think the company probably really has to be committed to those values, and that company again is engaged and active in the community. Great question.
Roxanne has a question about regulations for farmed fish food, and she's wondering about if you know anything about the food sources of farmed fish and the regulatory environment surrounding those food sources.
Yeah, I had heard that there was no regulation so far for the food that we feed farmed fish. I didn't know if that was true. I don't want to say that at the market if it's not true.
That sounds correct, but I actually don't know either, Roxanne.
Okay, I guess you can't be an expert of everything, Kelly.
Yeah.
And I guess the other question is that I keep on getting is Fukushima, whether there's any in Alaska, whether there's any of the fallout yet found in inspected fish in the regions that the Sitka salmon shares fish is sourced.
Sure. The answer is no. Thankfully, there is no impact on any of the seafood in Alaska from Fukushima, and there is ongoing monitoring at a number of levels by companies, by nonprofits, by Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, something the industry is very aware of. But thankfully, nothing is showing up in any of the seafood that we're eating or selling in Alaska. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes, I think, left.
Well, I have eternal questions, but I don't want to dominate. So I have another one, which is, do you think, to what extent do you think community-supported fisheries are having an economic impact on Alaska itself, on the community, the strength and the economic, the economy of Alaska?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they're starting to, and it it depends on the scale at which you consider it. So, the CSF I used to work with, and with salmon shares for individual fishermen. And some of you have probably seen the numbers, the differences in income for some of the fishermen that we work with. There's absolutely a very important economic impact for those fishermen. And as I'm looking at, the pictures here of some of these fishermen, just making a difference, for one of them means a lot to me personally. So I look at that scale as, putting more money in their pockets, helping them connect to consumers and know where their fish is coming from as really impactful and meaningful. In terms of how many fishermen are participating in CSFs right now or part of it, that's a great question. At Salmon Shares, I think we, through our own fishermen owners, which is a really unique structure of any CSF, that we do have fishermen owners in the company, and through our partner fishermen, I believe we have about 40 fishermen that we work with. And, there's tens of thousands of fishermen in Alaska. So we have a long way to go, I think, in growing the impact of CSFs. But we're adding more every year. And of course, there are other CSFs that work with local fishermen. I think it's making a difference in the communities, like Sitka, like Kodiak, Cordova, some of the communities where CSFs have grown and are now able to take a decent portion of the fishermen's catch. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other ones? One.
Well, I still have another one. I could go ahead and ask. And it's about politics. It's just about how much of a impact does the collective lobbying for the CSF, is it starting to gain momentum in Alaska and elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question also. So at the CSF that I used to work with within the nonprofit, so the nonprofit work is really around policy and management change to benefit small scale and community-based fishermen. The kind of developing new markets for small scale fishermen kind of came as a sidebar to the policy and management work. And we absolutely did find that once we were able to speak the lingo more of some of the companies, and we got more clout in the policy and management arena when we started selling seafood, interestingly enough, and when we kind of had some skin in that game. So I do think that as kind of the market share grows, the connections with consumer grow, building advocates in Alaska and I think nationwide. You all probably know this, it's not subversive, but we're really trying to build advocates also for the issues that matter to healthy fisheries and to small scale fishermen. And that is working, I would say, and we hope to continue to grow that in the future. But if you all got information, for example, on taking action on Pebble Mine and things of that nature, that is helping, to grow the kind of political clout of CSFs and small scale fishermen. Yeah, well, I think we are at the top of the hour. Again, I'll put my email in here. If any of you have questions, thoughts, want to join us at any of the events, please do so. Kelly at SitkaSalmonShares.com. And thank you so much for joining us during your lunch hour or whatever time it may be where you are. And thanks for being Salmon Shares members. It really means a lot to us.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Have a great day and great weekend.
You too.